My name is Courtney Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I thought I understood loyalty. I thought marriage meant partnership support, someone to hold your hand when life pressed too heavy. But the truth is, sometimes the moments that define us happen when we're left completely alone. I learned that the day I sat beside my mother-in-law Helen's hospital bed. The machines hummed softly, their steady beeping counting down her final breaths, until at 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, the sound stretched into one long, endless note. And just like that, she was gone. No one else was there. Not her son, my husband Josh. Not his sister Rachel. Not even a stray text asking how she was doing. The hallway outside buzzed with the noise of life families reuniting after surgeries, loved ones laughing and hugging, but inside Helen's room, it was only me. Silence and stillness, and the weight of her cooling hand in mine. A nurse came in quietly, her kindness the only witness to the 3 days I'd kept vigil. My calls unanswered, my messages ignored. She handed me a sealed envelope, her eyes soft. She asked me to give this to you. My fingers trembled as I took it. Helen and I had never been close. She had always been polite but distant, cordial in that surface-level way that leaves you guessing if you'll ever belong. And yet she had chosen me in her final hours to carry something forward. I opened the envelope. A rusted key was taped to the top of a thick sheet of stationery. Beneath it, in Helen's precise handwriting, was an address. And one chilling line: "They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." The words made my stomach twist. They didn't sound like the woman I had known, the quiet, graceful Helen, who rarely raised her voice. These words were raw, aching with betrayal, dripping with a promise of vengeance. That night I couldn't sleep. The key seemed to burn in my palm, demanding to be used. By dawn, I had made my decision. I didn't tell Josh where I was going. He hadn't even asked about his mother's passing. When I told him she had died, his response was a distracted, "Oh." When did that happen? Followed by a complaint about meetings. His indifference hollowed something in me. If he couldn't care about her, he would never care about me. The GPS led me far from the city, past quiet roads and open fields, until I reached a rusted iron gate half swallowed by overgrown bushes. The cottage beyond it was weathered, the white paint fading to gray. Wild roses clawed at shuttered windows. It looked abandoned, forgotten, but not unloved. The key turned in the lock easily, as though it had been waiting. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence, but everything was intact. Furniture shelves lined with books, photo albums stacked on the coffee table. It felt lived in, preserved, frozen in time. On the kitchen counter sat another envelope, this one addressed to Helen's lawyer, marked, "To be opened upon my death." And that's when I understood. This cottage wasn't just a forgotten property. This was Helen's real home. Not the sterile assisted living center Josh had insisted on. Here in these walls she had found her peace, her solitude. And somehow she wanted me to find it too. The next morning I delivered her envelope to the attorney Margaret Keller, where the reading of the will was scheduled. Josh drove in silence, his grip on the steering wheel tight. We picked up Rachel along the way, already bitter cigarette in hand, muttering about wasted time. Inside the office, two older women I vaguely recognized from Helen's church were waiting. They smiled kindly, though confusion shadowed their eyes. The air was tense as Margaret began. "This is the last will and testament of Helen Elizabeth Walsh, revised and notarized March 15th of this year." My breath caught. That was the day I had driven her downtown, waiting in the car, while she said it was about her medication plan. I had no idea it was this. Margaret's voice carried steady through the room. "To my son, Joshua Bennett, I leave my forgiveness, though you have not earned it." Josh's head snapped up, anger flashing. "What the hell does that mean?" "To my daughter, Rachel Bennett, I leave my wedding band, which you once admired. May it remind you that promises should be kept." Rachel's cheeks flushed red. She shifted, glaring at me as if I had something to do with it. The lawyer continued. "To my friends, Diane Mercer and Eleanor Thompson, I leave my deepest gratitude for the kindness you showed me in my final year and a gift of $5,000 each." The women gasped quietly, eyes filling with tears. And then came the words that silenced the room. "And to my daughter-in-law, Courtney Bennett, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including my residence at 47 Willow Lane, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies, and personal belongings. The room erupted. Rachel slammed her hand on the table. That's insane! She barely knew her. Josh's voice rose. There must be a mistake. Courtney wasn't even close to her. But Margaret only folded her hands calmly. There is no mistake. Helen was of sound mind. We have psychiatric evaluations and a video explaining her decision should it be contested. Josh turned to me, his eyes sharp with fury. You knew about this. You manipulated her when she was sick. My voice shook as I answered I didn't know. I thought she was at a doctor's appointment. I was waiting in the car. Rachel spat. Convenient. Playing the loyal daughter-in-law worked, didn't it? Margaret slid a document forward. You're welcome to contest, but I'd advise against it. Everything was done properly. Then she turned to me. Miss Bennett, the cottage alone is valued at approximately $300,000. The investment accounts total over $270,000. Insurance policies add another $150,000. Helen lived modestly but wisely. She wanted you to have this. My pulse thundered. I didn't understand. Why me? And then as the others stormed out, Margaret handed me a second envelope, Helen's final words written just for me. Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel. And when they do smile, turn and walk away. The weight of her voice pressed against my chest heavier than any inheritance. She wasn't giving me wealth, she was giving me her truth. I sat frozen in that office. Helen's letter heavy in my hand. Around me, the air still hummed with the aftershocks of my husband's outrage, Rachel's curses, and the lawyer's calm finality. But inside me, everything was quiet. Too quiet. As though the world had tilted and I was still waiting for the crash. On the drive home, Josh didn't speak to me. His knuckles were white around the steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight. Every now and then his eyes flicked toward me, and I could feel the weight of his suspicion, the venom of words he wanted to spit, but swallowed instead. Rachel had refused to even ride with us. She stormed off in a rage, vowing to fix this with her own lawyers. I stared out the window, the world blurring by, and thought about Helen's words. Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel. Was that really who she had been all along? Or had betrayal twisted her so deeply that vengeance was all she had left to pass on? When we finally pulled into our driveway, Josh slammed the car door so hard it echoed down the street. He didn't wait for me. He stormed inside, leaving me alone in the fading light. For a long moment, I stayed in the car, clutching the envelope against my chest. My heart ached with grief, but beneath it was something darker, an ember of fury I had tried for years to smother. That night, the silence between us was unbearable. I set the table for two, but Josh didn't come down. From upstairs, I heard drawers opening, the sound of something heavy being slammed shut. When I went up later, his suitcase was on the bed. You can't seriously be doing this, I whispered. He turned on me, eyes blazing. You think I don't see what this is? You wormed your way into her heart so you could take everything. You played the saint while I was busy working to keep this family afloat. Tears stung my eyes. I didn't ask for this, Josh. She chose me. Don't lie to me, he spat. You're not capable of that kind of loyalty. You were always scheming. My breath caught in my throat. In all our years together, he had never spoken to me like that. But in that moment, I understood something I hadn't dared admit before. He had never truly seen me, never respected me, never loved me the way a husband should. He left that night, the door slamming shut behind him. I stood in the empty house, trembling, the echo of his words still sharp in my ears. The next morning, I drove back to Willow Lane. The cottage looked softer in the daylight, the wild roses glowing faintly pink in the sun. I unlocked the door with the key Helen had given me and stepped inside again. This time, I didn't just look, I explored. Upstairs, the bedroom smelled faintly of lavender. On the dresser, a jewelry box stood open, filled with trinkets I had never seen her wear. In the closet, clothes still hung neatly, shoes lined up as though waiting for her to return. In the study, I found stacks of journals, each one carefully labeled with dates. My hands trembled as I opened the first. The entries were meticulous, her handwriting steady, even as the words grew heavier. She wrote about Josh and Rachel, her disappointments, her heartbreak, about how she had begged them to visit, begged them to see her as more than a burden. Entry after entry, the same refrain. They never came. They never called. And then in the later journals, my name appeared. At first, only small mentions. Courtney brought me tea. Courtney sat with me today. Then more. She listens. She doesn't judge. She reminds me of the girl I used to be before the betrayals hardened me. Tears blurred my vision as I read. I realized Helen hadn't chosen me out of spite for them. She had chosen me because I had given her what they never did: time, attention, humanity. By the time I closed the last journal, dusk had fallen. The cottage felt alive with her presence, as though she had been waiting for me to understand. That evening, Margaret called. Her voice was calm but firm. "Courtney, I need to warn you. Rachel has already filed notice to contest the will. Josh is backing her. They're alleging undue influence, that you manipulated Helen when she was vulnerable." My stomach clenched. "But there's evidence. The evaluations, the video." "Yes," she said, "and we'll use all of it. But you need to be prepared. They're going to drag your name through the mud. They'll say anything to break you." I thanked her, though my hands were shaking as I hung up. I sat alone in the cottage's living room, the journals stacked around me like fragile shields. For the first time in years, I let the anger rise unchecked. Not just at Josh and Rachel, but at myself for enduring so much indifference, for mistaking crumbs for love. Helen's words echoed again: "Forgive no one, let them beg, let them kneel." And I realized I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance. I was fighting for my voice, for the truth of who she had been and who I was becoming. The battle was only beginning, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The day of the first hearing dawned gray, a thin drizzle veiling the city in silver. I sat in the back seat of Margaret's car, the courthouse looming ahead like a fortress. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I had Helen's journals stacked neatly in my bag, each one a quiet soldier ready for battle. Josh and Rachel were already there when we arrived. They stood together on the courthouse steps, united by greed, if not by love. Rachel wore a crimson suit that screamed defiance, while Josh's tie was knotted too tight, his anger barely contained behind the mask of calm. Cameras flashed as they spoke to reporters, painting themselves as dutiful children, robbed of their rightful legacy. She was manipulated, Rachel declared, her voice sharp as glass. Our mother was weak, and Courtney took advantage of her illness. This so-called will is nothing but a fraud. Josh nodded solemnly, his hand gripping Rachel's arm for effect. We only want what's fair. My wife never cared for my mother until she saw the money. This is about justice. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to scream. Margaret placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Let them talk. Every word will crumble when we show the truth. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with anticipation. The judge presided with calm authority, his eyes scanning the packed benches. I took my seat at the front, Margaret beside me, the journals stacked like fragile proof of love no one else had bothered to give. Rachel's lawyer opened with venom. He painted me as a schemer, a woman who had wormed her way into an old woman's life, feeding on her loneliness, twisting her mind until she signed everything over. Each word landed like a lash across my skin, but I sat still, my hands clasped in my lap. Then Margaret rose. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of truth. She spoke of Helen's sharp mind, her meticulous care with details, her independence until the very end. And then she pressed play on a video. Helen appeared on the screen, sitting upright in the very study where I had found her journals. Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. I, Helen Walsh, make this decision freely. I leave my estate to Courtney Bennett, not out of obligation, but because she was there when no one else was. She sat with me when I was sick. She listened when I cried. She reminded me that I was still a person, not a burden. My children turned away. Courtney did not. This is my choice, my gift, my truth. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I swallowed hard tears, burning my eyes. Rachel leapt to her feet. She was coerced. That video was staged. The judge silenced her with a firm bang of his gavel. Sit down, Ms. Bennett. Margaret wasn't finished. She opened the first journal and began to read passages aloud. The words painted a picture no lawyer could dispute: loneliness, betrayal, and the simple gratitude of a dying woman for the only person who still cared. Josh shifted uncomfortably, his mask cracking as the entries cut too close. Rachel fumed, her fists clenched tight, but there was nothing she could say. Helen's voice echoed from every page. When the session ended, the judge ordered a recess. I stepped outside into the drizzle, the cool air sharp against my flushed skin. Reporters swarmed, microphones shoved in my face. "Courtney, how do you respond to the accusations?" one asked. I met their gaze, my voice steady. "I didn't ask for this inheritance. Helen chose me. She chose love over neglect. If anyone thinks money could buy that, they never knew her." The cameras clicked furiously. For once, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone finally standing in her own truth. That evening, I returned to the cottage. I sat at the old wooden desk, the journals spread around me like a circle of quiet voices. The rain tapped gently at the windows, and in the silence I whispered a promise. "I won't let them erase you. I won't let them twist your memory into something it wasn't. You trusted me, and I will not fail you." As the words left my lips, something inside me hardened into resolve. This fight was no longer about money or even justice. It was about legacy, about truth, about refusing to be silenced. The next round would be uglier, I could feel it in my bones, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The second hearing drew a larger crowd. Word of the inheritance battle had spread, and the courthouse was packed with reporters, curious townsfolk, and even members of Helen's church who had quietly taken sides. I walked in with Margaret at my side, my heart steady this time. I wasn't just defending myself, I was carrying Helen's truth into that room. Rachel looked feral, her eyes bloodshot, her lips pressed thin. Josh wouldn't meet my gaze. His face drawn with shame, he tried to hide behind arrogance. Their lawyer pounded on his briefcase as though sheer noise could drown out the evidence. The judge called us to order, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Rachel's lawyer opened again, this time with even harsher words, accusing me of deceit, manipulation, even elder abuse. He waved documents that supposedly showed I had interfered with Helen's finances. Each accusation stung, but Margaret remained composed, allowing him to spew his venom until he had nothing left. Then she rose. Her calmness was a storm of its own. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "we've heard slander today, but let us hear the truth." She handed the bailiff a USB drive. A new recording flickered to life on the courtroom screen. Helen again, this time sitting in her cottage, her face lit softly by the afternoon sun. "If you are watching this," she began, her voice steady. "Then, my children have chosen greed over grace. I loved them once, but they turned away. They left me alone when I needed them most. Only Courtney stayed. Only she reminded me that my life still had meaning. This inheritance is not about money, it is about gratitude. It is about love, given freely when I had nothing left to give. If they contest this will, they reveal their own hearts, not mine." The room fell into stunned silence. Rachel shot to her feet, shouting. She was sick. She didn't know what she was saying. But Margaret was ready. She produced the psychiatric evaluations, the doctor's notarized statements confirming Helen's sound mind, the time-stamped video logs. Piece by piece, she dismantled their claims until Rachel's voice cracked into desperate sobs. Then Margaret turned to Josh. "Would you like to explain, Mr. Bennett, why you deposited $20,000 from your mother's account into your personal savings 2 months before her death?" A ripple of gasps swept the room. Josh's face drained of color. That was for her medical expenses. The receipts show otherwise, Margaret cut in smoothly. "Designer suits, a resort booking, jewelry for a woman who isn't your wife." The words hung heavy in the air. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. This betrayal was nothing new, it was simply dragged into the light. The judge raised his gavel sharply. "Enough! I have seen and heard all I need. The evidence is clear. Helen Walsh acted of her own free will. The estate remains with her chosen heir, Courtney Bennett. Contest dismissed." The gavel struck final and resounding. Rachel wailed, slamming her fist against the table while Josh sat frozen. His mask shattered the whispers of the crowd, swirling like a storm around him. For the first time, I felt no fear of them, only a deep, quiet release. As we walked out of the courtroom, the cameras swarmed again. Someone shouted, "Courtney, do you feel victorious?" I paused on the courthouse steps, the sunlight breaking through clouds to warm my face. "This was never about victory," I said softly. "It was about truth. about honoring a woman who deserved to be remembered for who she really was. Money can be spent, but dignity is eternal. That night, I returned to the cottage once more. I lit a single candle in the window, just as Helen had written in her journals she used to do whenever she wanted to feel less alone. The flame flickered against the glass, and I sat beside it, breathing in the scent of lavender still lingering in the air. Aaron hadn't called. Rachel would never forgive me. Josh would likely disappear into his shame or into someone else's arms. But none of that mattered, because I understood something Helen had wanted me to see all along. Forgiveness is not always a gift you owe others. Sometimes it is the freedom you owe yourself. I would not forgive them, not yet. Perhaps not ever. But I would not carry their hatred in my chest like an anchor. I would carry Helen's love instead, her trust, her belief that even when abandoned, we can choose to rise. The roses outside swayed in the evening breeze. I opened the window and let the cool air and the candlelight warming my face. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not because I had won, but because I had finally learned that betrayal cannot define you unless you let it. And if you've stayed with me through this story, I thank you. If it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs strength. Like this video if it gave you hope. Leave a comment with your own story of resilience. I want to hear it. And please subscribe so we can keep building a space where truth outlives lies and healing is stronger than betrayal.